Simeon Toko was a black African man born in 1918, and he had superhuman abilities similar to Jesus Christ. He was healing people, and he even summoned cherubim and seraphim angels to help defeat the Belgian army. But then the elite powers do not want the world knowing about this man because he was the first of many more Messiah-like figures to emerge. In the 1960s, Simeon Toko said more people like him would come and that the elites wouldn't be able to stop them. It is believed Simeon Toko was the first of the 144,000 described in the Bible. He was healing people and performing supernatural miracles. Some of the superhuman qualities Simeon Toko had was regenerating back his flesh even if he was completely eradicated. One time doctors heard of the rumors of his mystical abilities of being immortal, and they removed his heart surgically to see if it was true. He woke up from the operating table saying, "Why are you persecuting me like this? Give me my heart back." This left the doctors completely shocked. Simeon Toko was reaching people with his message, and the cabal attempted to silence because they found out he had Jesus-like abilities, but no attempts on his life succeeded, and he just kept coming. This is not a fact, just a theory.
No matter what happened, God has led you home. So, lay him down, Sista. Sword and shield. Study war no more. God has led you home.
You saved your room, then let the demon in through the front door and your back door, so your priority is to get cracked? I'm so done with ghosters. I hope he's not dead. Stop calling on the spirit, Cherie. He's not dead, just disinterested. The ancestors don't chase crusty souls. Mercury was in Gatorade, that's why he cheated. Mercury ain't the one that picked him. That was you, Miss A. He got potential. That's not astrology, that's denial.
We're doing a binding spell so he never leaves me again.
You binding your self-worth to dirty drawers and a Four Loko? Girl, even Jesus walk off.
I'm cleansing my aura for a fresh start.
Then delete the soul tie.
I not just block him.
Miss him.
You can't align your chakras while opening your taco to chaos.
If it's aligned with abundance, it's still manifestation, right? Spirit said financial freedom, not financial fetish, Sherry. That card ain't blessed, it's bound.
If your left eye jumps, someone's gonna make you mad. But if your right eye jumps, you're gonna see someone you have not in a long time.
Hoodoo lady, how do you do? Tell me you'll take a boot and turn to a brand new shoe. But don't put that thing on me. Don't put that thing on me. Don't put that thing on me, 'cause I'm going back to Tennessee. Hoodoo lady, you can turn water wine. I've been wondering where have you been all this time. I'm sitting here broke, and I ain't got a dime. You all could put something and the Dukes of...
Greetings and salutations, honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101. Powered, sponsored, supported, and promoted by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. Become a part of something extraordinary. New Orleans International Voodoo Day is not just an event, it is a movement that celebrates culture, fosters education, and connects people from around the globe. By sponsoring this event, you're supporting a tax-deductible cause that preserves heritage, uplifts art and education, and fosters healing within the community and beyond. Your sponsorship goes beyond promoting your business. It demonstrates your commitment to cultural preservation and education while supporting a unique event that brings international recognition to New Orleans. Events like symposiums, art exhibitions, sacred processions, and global speakers offer unparalleled opportunities to honor history and inspire a brighter future. Supporting an event like this means empowering a community, enriching cultural understanding, and making a meaningful impact on the world. It connects your brand to a celebration that values unity, diversity, and progress while helping preserve traditions for generations to come. Join us in creating a legacy. Explore our sponsorship tiers as well as other opportunities for participation and volunteership in this powerful and historic, now international event. Help us make New Orleans International Voodoo Day an unforgettable celebration, now in our third year. And before I unmute my mic, I want to certainly thank and show my appreciation for those who continue to show up here live in the chat during the podcast. Greetings, Britt Brat Dash. Greetings and salutations, Nina Lloyd. We certainly do appreciate you. And I will be unmuting my co-host momentarily. When we left off in our narrative, we were discussing predictions of slave fortune tellers that had positive outcomes, such as that with Uncle Frank of St. Louis, Missouri, described by William Wells Brown as a slave who was very distinguished, not only among the slave population, but also among the whites as a fortune teller. But we began to briefly tell the story of a more famous case, Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman had frequent premonitions and visions while helping slaves escape from bondage. Sarah Bradford, Tubman's biographer, remarked that she is the most shrewd and practical person in the world. Yet she is a firm believer in omens, dreams, and warnings. Harriet Tubman reportedly had dreams that foretold her flight from bondage, helped her avoid pursuers during her missions in the South, and predicted the Civil War and the eventual emancipation of all slaves 3 years before these events actually occurred. According to Tubman, her father was the source of these abilities because he had an uncanny skill of predicting the weather and even foretold the Mexican-American War. Based on evidence derived from trial records, slave narratives, interviews, autobiographies, and other sources, a composite sketch of the typical slave conjurer can be drawn. Conjurers were often isolated ascetics, living on the margins of the slave community and wrapped in mystery. Their elevated status on the plantation and their mastery over mystical forces made them simultaneously feared and respected. These spiritualists claimed to possess a variety of supernatural powers, including the ability to communicate with the spirit world and the power to heal the sick. And many claimed possession of second sight or the ability to foretell future events through interpreting visions and dreams. Their command of esoteric forces and otherworldly knowledge allowed them to gain influence over the enslaved, which resulted in conjurers playing central roles in various acts of slave resistance. In terms of their collective belief in conjure and magic, North American slaves shared similar cultural experiences with Africans throughout the Atlantic world. This conclusion then firmly cites and situates the North American slave experience into context with other diasporic slave societies, while underscoring the notion that far from being accommodationist, North American conjurers were vital in the creation of revolutionary consciousness among fellow enslaved Africans. There were later archaeological findings based on really some stories told first, I believe, by Zora Neale Hurston. But in her 1931 documentation of African American spiritual practices, author and anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston wrote about hoodoo, a set of traditions created by enslaved Africans in North America with roots in indigenous West African religion. And these practices were fundamental to the way the enslaved people defined their relationship to the world, to life, to death, and to each other. In the late 1980s, archaeologists began to make connections between these traditions and some of the material evidence that they were uncovering at former plantation sites. From the discovery of crystals and other objects during 1986 and 1991 excavations at the Montclair Mansion in Baltimore, to the bundle of objects unearthed beneath a street in Annapolis in 2008. These artifacts can paint a clearer, more nuanced picture of the lives of enslaved people. Recently, Maryland, the site of those other finds, has continued to produce such historical insights. In August 2022, a team of archaeologists led by Julie Shabalitsky, Chief of Cultural Resources at the Maryland Department of Transportation, discovered another spiritual cache at the Thompson Farm, the birthplace of abolitionist Harriet Tubman in Dorchester County. This latest discovery, along with foundations of a home, provide a window into the complex spiritual lives of the 40 or so people enslaved at Anthony Thompson's plantation, and a new perspective on where the famed Underground Railroad activist was raised. Since fall 2020, Shablitsky and her team have been excavating public and private property that was once a part of this farm. Their first discovery was the home of Ben Ross, Tubman's father, on the land that is now part of the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge. They also found artifacts dating back to the 1800s, including nails, bricks, and dish fragments. Then Shablitsky started thinking about other individuals enslaved by Thompson on his 1,000-acre farm. We began to look across the entire area, including on private land, she says. 2 years into their excavation efforts, they discovered foundations of a brick home containing hundreds of artifacts dating between 1800 and 1840. And among them was a curious assemblage that had been buried underneath what would have been the fireplace, an unexpected glass trinket, ceramics, pieces of metal, in a place that must have been placed there deliberately. And based on the house's foundation, they identified the home as having belonged to the enslaved overseer named Jerry Manuki. Other archaeologists who have done similar studies have found that when you have a building that is well built with a brick foundation, it would have been a more stately home rather than a more rustic cabin that is inexpensively built, said Shablitsky. But the artifacts tell a slightly different story. Looking at the artifacts, they were showing someone who was impoverished. And that difference between the artifacts in the home and the home itself many times will signal that you have the home of an overseer. Such enslaved overseers were a key part of the plantation life and the social dynamics of slavery. Many academics and historians have considered how much of their homelands remained with enslaved people when they arrived in the Americas. But there are ongoing questions about how much of these traditions survived, what they would have looked like, and how they evolved generation after generation. And according to Shablitsky's foodways, such as recipes and spiritual practices, were some of the last cultural norms to disappear or evolve into something unrecognizable. Archaeologists have the advantage of sometimes being able to tease these details out of the archaeological record, she says. And so hoodoo was created by enslaved Africans between the 16th and 19th centuries and is composed of two components: the spiritual, conjure, and the practical, root work, Conjure involves working with and calling upon spirits and ancestors, while root work involves working with organic material for healing, self defense, and protection. And according to Yvonne Shiro, a professor of religion at Swarthmore College, hoodoo can be used as an umbrella term to characterize the intermingling of African spiritual traditions with Christianity and sometimes indigenous traditions. For enslaved people, these practices were very important and very useful in order to get through life, she says. The spiritual bundle at the Thompson farm was the first Shabitsky had encountered as an archaeologist. At the time of the discovery, her team was working on two sites, the Ross home and the Manuki home. I got a picture sent to me saying, "Hey, we just found this," she says. A glass heart shaped perfume bottle stopper. Shablitsky found it odd. Needing to know more, she jumped into her UTV and drove through the swamp for about a mile. I asked them where it came from, thinking it might have just been on the upper layer. She says, meaning it could have been deposited in modern times. But her team said that it was further down, where the fireplace was. There were no other objects immediately around it. The team continued to dig, and the next thing to pop out was half of the ceramic dish. As they dug, more objects appeared: a copper alloy button, iron nails. It not it's not only about what we're finding, but also where we're finding it, she says. Logically, at the time, it was believed that spirits would come in and out of the home through the fireplace. So placing spiritual objects beneath it protected those inside from bad spirits and negative energy. Whitney Battle Baptiste, an anthropologist at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, says that the placement of these artifacts is extremely important. In order for the enslaved to be able to practice their spiritual traditions, they had to hide their tools from Christian enslavers. They weren't going to build a little temple over here or put a bunch of rocks and pots where they wanted to, because it wouldn't go over on a plantation being controlled by a Christian, she says. And according to Battle Baptiste, for those practicing those spiritual traditions and using what they had for protection, certain items were buried and hidden in specific areas. There's this idea of keeping spaces that are open protected, she says. So you will find these artifacts near doorways and fireplaces. Archaeologists are now more aware of the presence of African spiritual practices in the archaeological record. Once archaeologists like Mark Leon, who has excavated in Annapolis and Maryland's eastern shore for decades, begin to recognize these artifact clusters, these spirit bundles, everybody else began listening and starting to become more vigilant about the things that they were finding, says Shablaski. And so, furthermore, for years, the birthplace and early life of Harriet Tubman had been unknown to historians and archaeologists. With every discovery at the Thompson farm, new pieces of the puzzle fall into place. You'll hear all the time about Harriet Tubman with her faith in God, but she was also living alongside people who may have believed in God, but also turned back to their Western African spirituality that was passed down by their parents and grandparents, Shablisky says. And according to Battle Baptiste, this increased attention to the lives of the enslaved should include revisiting existing collections of artifacts, collections that could take a whole new meaning. Does it look like when someone who comes from Black studies incorporates that with anthropology and learns the practices of and archaeology, and then looks at a collection and asks a different set of questions? What may look like a simple heart-shaped bottle stopper could carry something much more profound. And so we continue to record the footprint of not only specific ethnic groups, and their link to the continued practices, but to now ritual objects and sacred spaces created solely for the acknowledgement of ancestral powers, but also conjure magic and its subsequent effects on revolution. I want to invite my co-host into the continuing conversation. Uh, my first priest and wild man, Joshua Nalatana, our elder, Green Soap, Elder Reggie, and the beloved Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val Martinez. Come on in, Queen Mother, ladies first.
Hey, everyone. So glad you could join us tonight. Listening to that Divine Prince reminded me when I was younger, we did a lot of fishing and hunting and digging up in swampy areas. And my mama always told me we dug with the what I call the short shovel and the hand shovel. We were looking for earthworms to fish with and all kind of bugs that we could fish with. And my mama be looking for some kind of roots. What I don't know what she did with them, but and she always said, if you find anything buried, do not touch it. Call me. Just don't touch it. And that's what that was reminding me of. Finding stuff, finding, spirit bags and stuff. I would be quickly putting that dirt back on top of that bag. I'm not opening, I'm not looking. I don't want to know. I don't want to see. But that was one thing that I knew. If you digging up anything, anywhere to make a garden or anything, and you uncover jewelry, any kind of glass, anything, do not touch it. Leave it undisturbed. At least try to leave it as much undisturbed as you can. So that's my experience with unearthing any kind of artifacts that you find buried. What about you, Joshua?
Good day, everybody. All is well. How y'all doing? Elder Reggie, Sister Toni Val, Divine Prince. I was listening to what was being said earlier about the practice of hoodoo and the uncovering of artifacts by anthropologists and archaeologists that are digging up in grounds where the Thompson plantation, where the Harriet Tubmans were at a point in time. I feel like you're right, Toni, in terms of like digging things. I spent a lot of times in canals over here in West Wego and moving around things down there, looking for different things. And yeah, I remember that being told to me, like in terms of finding things. I used to just search for stones or, like you said, worms and stuff to fish with, but or bait to fish with. Might be crawfish in there. But, we would be playing around there, but when we find something that looked like or resembled something that meant somebody put there for a reason, we wouldn't touch it. We would just even bottles, like even old, I don't know if there was beer bottles or wine bottles. Just wouldn't touch it. Look at it and keep moving.
You know where I bet they have a lot of stuff at, but I doubt archaeologists could go in there. But if they ever did, I would like to find out what they found in Hope Cemetery. That's one of the oldest cemeteries where Black people were buried in the city. That was officially a cemetery. It's called like a pauper cemetery. That's why I would love to know what would they find there. What about you, Elder Reggie? You familiar with Hope Cemetery?
Oh, yes, I am, Sister Toni. Peace, Divine Prince, Brother Joshua, Sister Toni, in the collective chat. Yes, I'm very familiar with Hope Cemetery, but I'm also familiar with burying stuff in the ground. I know that tonight's topic is dealing with some the artifact that they found from yesteryear. But in hoodoo, there's still methodology of burying stuff today to get certain things done. If you're trying to purchase a particular home, or you're trying to get a neighbor to move, or you're trying to get a couple to split up or whatever, there's earthen work that you can do, things that you could bury into the ground, do an incantation, and looking for the manifestation of it to manifest. And so the earth, even working with graveyard dirt, or burying things in the graveyard or close to a graveyard, all these practice, some of it is still prevalent today. So I'm very familiar with it. So I'm not surprised when the archaeologists go deeper and find things that was used by our forefathers.
I bet you they would find a lot of stuff buried under the plantation steps, front steps and back steps. Because that's a popular place to do that type of work and bury stuff under the steps. Crossing over in and out of the house.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I never was into really burying stuff like that. But I do know, that's some powerful work right there. You're doing some powerful stuff right there. And actually, I'm kind of afraid to do kind of work like that because I don't want it to come back on me. Like when you said to break somebody up and stuff, and I know that's one of the main works people be wanting you to do. Soon as they find out you into it, that's the first thing out of their mouth. About love, either getting rid of somebody or getting somebody they want. And that's two things I don't mess with. That area.
Yeah, and what you would find, I am really heavy into the 4 elements. But if you look at the elements and the workings that is coming through the elements, you'll see why I am attracted to the elements. Earth, you could do a lot of works, good and bad, through the earth. We all know of water, the way you can use water in hoodoo. And fire, such even burning a candle, burning small fire, and also incense, which covers under air. And as Divine Prince was reading, that small perfume bottle, I see it as a perfume because spirits are attracted to certain scents. So even back then, let's say you took the slave master wife cologne, perfume I meant. And if you could take that perfume and put it in a certain location, a certain spirit will follow it, but that spirit will bring you a favor from bringing it a particular cologne. And we come to modern day and we see the use of Florida water so prevalent. But how did Florida water become prevalent in hoodoo? Florida water originated as a barbershop salve to take after the men got shaved. They put it on their face, but they also needed a scent. They didn't want to smell like whatever it may have smelled like back then. And so that Florida water just moved into the hoodoo work, for one, because of the scent, which falls under the nature energy of air. And
Elder
so,
Reggie,
yes.
If I may, just a quick point. Me and Toni kind of came to the conclusion that the barbershop was often where men hid their involvement in hoodoo. The barbershop and the mortuaries.
Yes, Divine Prince. Yes. Yeah. Yes, we're going deep with it. Yes. And if we continue to talk, more things will be uncovered, and we can see how voodoo evolved, how it just evolved into a modern day practice versus when it was gaining legs back during slavery up into what we call the Reconstruction era, up into Jim Crow South. and it continued to grow because people used what was around them at the time to get things done.
And what we call Florida water, the things that gave the Florida water a smell and the things that went into the original making of Florida water had spiritual energies in them. It wasn't just aquadigio. They mixed it for a reason. It was a protection and a cleansing spell that was in Florida water.
Yeah, your sister Toni, see, I agree, but Florida water was developed by the Italians. I believe the Italians had the occupation of cutting hair and for men, as Divine Prince had said, and they just wanted, let's just say, like an aftershave or something to stop the razor bumps and to stop the cuts and all that. But they also needed a smell. So you are right about that. And if we be truth be told, the Italians and the Irish also practice folk medicine. And so as they developed some of these items, they put folk medicine into their tinctures also. And it became a mixing of the cultures.
That's how we get the Black Mexican Indians out on St. Joseph night with the Italians. So they put their own spiritual work on it to hide what they was doing under the guise of it being a cologne. But them men went to that barber shop to get works done. Okay, you know how they say Marie Laveau was a hairdresser? Well, they don't talk that much about her husband Glapion, but he was a barber.
Ooh, okay, I'm learning. Oh, see?
Yeah, go look him up. He was a barber. And to this day, there were, well, I know descendants of Glapions, and they got a whole family line, like they say, passed on from generation to generation, of barbers with that last name, Glapion.
May God bless you and the Glapions trust you.
Oh, yeah, that's the mortician. That's Glap. God gonna bless you and Glap gonna dress you. Yep, that's what we used to say all the time. And you know, in the night water across the canal, the Glapions and the other ones was barbers. They had one on Johnson and Foster. That was a Glapion barber shop right there. But yeah, it was that Florida water. I got some in the spray bottle right now. I keep it. I buy it by the big bottle.
And we
I
can't.
buy it by the big bottle.
I know we're on the topic of hoodoo, and I just want to make sure that we are definitely still touching on the fact that you're talking about root work, you're talking about working with earth, you're talking about working with the ground, and that is something that is well known here in tradition of American Indian culture here. Mounds that's been built throughout the Southeast and all over the place that have been discovered and haven't been discovered. The way they use the earth and the way they use a lot of ways that they use the earth, they're still trying to figure out. I actually was up in Poverty Point the other week, earlier this week, and they have a couple of locations that has magnetic signals come from out of the ground, and they're trying to figure out why, or the scientific reason for it to be happening, and they didn't have they're still studying to figure it out. But the magnetic signal is strong enough for them to actually pinpoint it to a specific location, but they're not understanding the reason for it. Now that is Poverty Point is probably over one of the oldest American Indian sites in America, in the Southeast specifically, that has been archaeologically examined and looked upon. So I do want to mention that, because that is something that those people along with Africans was enslaved, along with during that time, and we are still here in that way, and we have to continue to, how can I say this, understand that in a way where this is the ground that we stand on, and the utilization of that and the intelligence of that comes from those people of that land, and also of others, but mainly of those people of the land.
I saw you had taken some pictures while you were at Poverty Point. Did you happen to ground yourself while you were there?
Yeah, I did. I grounded myself while I was there. I
You
did
took a
couple
nice
of
barefoot walk.
yes, I did, Sister Toni.
They even say that compasses don't work at some of those mounds. They say they just spin around. You can pull your compass out and they just spin around.
Because it's magnetic energy that's in the ground there specifically, so that would definitely do it.
Yeah.
And like I said, in terms of working and energy working, a magnetic energy is something that does delve into that. And it's a protection, obviously, that they put in place. So,
Well, we coming to the end of our show tonight, and I'd like to have Elder Reggie close us out. Elder Reggie, take it over.
Thank you, Sister Toni. Thanks again, Divine Prince, for hosting a great show. Brother Joshua, good information about Poverty Point in Poverty, Louisiana, in that area. And hopefully we'll get to build some more on that, because I've been up there doing research myself, and we'll talk up on it. But with that, I like to say, lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that's bind the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. And we continue to work on that division. We continue to uncover some truths that is laid beneath the earth. And with that, I say, Ashe, Ashe, Asheo. Thanks, everyone. We love you.
Good night,
Vodou,
everyone.
peace and blessings.
Ashe.
For sure.
No!